Recording. Oh, Mark is here. Mark Rochester. Good. Okay, well, we want to start as close to on time as possible so others can join later on. So, welcome to the Journalism's Roundtable. My name is Richard Prince, and I write the online column called Journal-isms. That's journal-isms, ISMS.com, on diversity issues in the news business. This roundtable is an extension of that. We started the roundtable in 1999 when a friend of ours was leaving to pursue a doctorate. She said, keep these going, and we have. We've met every month in various restaurants in Washington, D.C. until the COVID pandemic, when we switched to Zoom. Our participation multiplied because we got people from all over the country and abroad, and we hope to have more roundtables that are hybrid, that is meeting in person as well as having people attend via Zoom. And that's if people don't get too comfortable with Zoom. Last time, last time we met in person and had the hybrid, we were blessed to be at the home of the National Conference of Negro Women, courtesy of the Joint Center for Political Studies, and that is where we assessed Jesse Jackson just about a couple of months before he passed away. Other times we've been hosted by journalism organizations in DC and at the DC campuses of journalism schools. We think of this as an online breakfast or luncheon or dinner party with the purpose to network and to learn. Some of the networking takes place in the chat room, so those on Zoom, please feel free to make use of it. And special welcome to those on YouTube who will see this later, if all goes well. And please leave messages there as well if you want to reach us or comment on what you've seen and heard. So, with that being said, we want to start off with, well, our subject first, which is students of color in these times of anti-immigration and anti-DEI actions by federal, state, and local authorities. But before we get to that, we want to acknowledge and to pay tribute to one of our regulars who passed away on Friday, and that is Diana Fuentes, who is was the executive director of Investigative Reporters and Editors, and who was a friend of many and a champion of diversity and all other wonderful causes. And we have with us Cheryl Thompson, Cheryl W. Thompson, who was a board president of IRE, and she will be the first person to talk about Dee Dee, as they call her, and then we'll open it to others who want to have something to say. So, Cheryl, please take it away. What should we know about Dee Dee?
Thank you, Richard, and hi, everybody. It's good to see you. Diana was, gosh, where do I start with Diana? She was amazing. She was when I was really happy when I was board president, that we found her. And she was, of course, the first person of color to serve in that role. So that made me happy as the first Black president of IRE to find another woman of color to serve. And she has just been amazing. It is really, I am, and I speak for a lot of people, I think, that I am really saddened by her death. It is a huge, huge loss for people who knew her, for the organization, for journalism in general. She was a true champion. She was huge on diversity. That was one of her things. She had a great management style, and she had a lot of management skills as an editor, of course, a newspaper editor. But she had 3 decades. She was a journalist for more than 3 decades, and she brought that to the role. And she also brought her uh, commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion, and that she was a perfect fit, I think, for that role. And she came with a vision to IRE, which included initiatives to support investigative journalists, particularly at smaller newspapers, and at broadcast outlets and other news online sites. And she wanted to expand the organization's program that provides investigative training to HBCUs. And she just sort of ingratiated herself into NABJ. And, Diana was always there, right? And she's a lifelong member of NAHJ. And I want to say she might have even been a lifetime member of NABJ. Diana was like everywhere, but she was beloved by most people. I don't know anybody who did not like and respect Diana. And her passing is really a great loss for everyone.
Here, here. Okay. With that, those who have a glass, let's toast the memory of Diana Fuentes. Here, here.
Here, here.
All right. All right. May she rest in peace. And now McNelly Torres has got her hand raised, and she will also say a few words about Diana.
Thank you.
McNelly, it's all yours.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Richard. Thank you, Richard.
Hmm.
I'm Magnelli Torres. I'm a long-time investigative reporter here in South Florida, and I work with Didi. That's how many of us, people work close to her, know her. We call her Didi. Um, she was my first editor of color when I was a young reporter at the San Antonio Express News. She was the 9 editor there at the time. I was covering education, and she was always so kind. Strong, determined, smart. She had high standards, but she never demeaned people, you know. And she was breaking ceilings all the time, breaking ceilings. I mean, cracking. And the most amazing thing about Didi is that and I wrote something. I have a newsletter and it's coming out tomorrow. I've been traveling and I'm sick. Richard, I'm here because I wanted to talk about Didi, but I am not feeling very well. So I might not make it for the whole program. Which I love what you do here, and I really do appreciate you. And Didi was a regular here all the time.
Was.
So I left San Antonio. She left San Antonio before me to go to Laredo to be an editor at her hometown newspaper. I was so upset because I adore her. But we stay in touch and we had this long lasting relationship, friendship for over 20 years. She
Mm.
was my confidant, my mentor. I was so happy when she took over the helm of IRE. And, I got to thank Cheryl here for that, because, she believed in diversity like many of us. People of color. She knows what the fight is, but she also understands the underdog. And like Cheryl was saying, she cared a lot about bringing, providing that access to small newsrooms to have investigative training and the tools that they need to produce those stories that are so important. So I was abroad when I got the news. I was really upset. I'm still trying to process this. She lost her husband years ago, who was also a journalist. She and her husband were very well known for helping a lot of young reporters start their careers. And I don't know. It's really hard to talk about her at this moment, but I am going to miss her. She and I text all the time. For January 6th, we in Puerto Rico celebrate, the Three Kings Day. She sent me a text, "Hey, McNelly, happy Feliz Dia de los Reyes," and I was like, "You celebrate that?" Because we do in Puerto Rico, but and then you know, she she was on, she was a rare diamond in a rocky mountain that is this business, where we have so many people who are rude and arrogant. So we could learn so much from Didi, or how humble and what a good human being she was.
Hmm.
So that's it. The end.
And Richard, can
Let's,
I just add that she really was grace under fire. I
yeah.
never saw Diane. She never like got ruffled, not publicly. She
Mm.
always kept her cool. And I want to say too that she not only did she help people in a newsroom, but if you were doing something outside the newsroom, like I had a book that came out a couple of months ago. And I was in San Antonio, and Diana Didi like put out this big thing on LinkedIn, like promoting it. And then she showed up. She showed up last month at my book event, she and Francisco. And I just thought that was so lovely. It was at night. She didn't have to show up. She showed up because she cared. And that's who she was. And that's what I think I'm going to miss.
Here, here. Okay. I see Teresa Puente has got her hand raised. Teresa?
Thank you so much for including me. I'm Teresa Puente. I teach journalism at Cal State Long Beach, and I've also been a longtime member of NHJ, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and that's where I first met Dee Dee. Gosh, like in the mid 90s, so close to 30 years ago. I was a young reporter at the Chicago Tribune at the time, and I got onto the board as a regional rep for NHJ. And Dee Dee was on the board and always showed such kindness and compassion and generosity. Uh, you know, uh, and just, I would see her at the conferences every year. And so last year I went to NHJ. It was in Chicago, my hometown. And I was just chatting with Dee Dee and her dear friend Nora Lopez, also Tejana from Texas. And I was like, what are you guys doing right now? And they're like, oh, we're going to go to this reception and that reception. Then we're going to see a blues show. So I learned something new about Dee Dee, that she loved the blues. And so I met up with her and we heard some live blues. And that was the last time I saw her in person last summer in Chicago. So I'll just conclude by saying, like, her generosity, kindness, and empathy really were qualities that made her a true leader. And I just think qualities we need, not just in journalism, but in the world right now.
Here, here. Okay. Jill Geisler.
Um, I have to echo what Cheryl said so well. Dee Dee would call me when she faced a challenge or was trying to think of some strategy and was, making plans for IRE. She just liked to be able to think those things through. And a little earlier today, there was a gathering online from IRE. Some of the folks who were there are here. And I shared that information about how she strategized, but it was really her being the right person at the right time for IRE, post Me Too, post George Floyd, post, pre, during, and pandemic. All of those challenges and the current challenges, both to independent journalism and to diversity, equity, and inclusion, met a real force in Dee Dee. And what everyone knew when you looked at her, she represented what you stood for. And
Hmm.
that's why people trusted her so deeply. You hear stories about her, how fond people are. But at the end of the day, you could look at her and see what you stood for.
Well, all right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anyone else?
Hey,
Okay.
Richard,
All right.
I have my hand up. Gilbert,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm Gilbert Bailone, now with NHJ. I've actually been with NHJ a long time. I'm now on the staff. I echo everything that's been said. I just would like to say that she, while she was known outside of NHJ, within NHJ, there was a special love for Dee Dee.
Hmm.
Because she was always present, always available. And also being a Texas editor with her way back in the day, she really was a trailblazer. There were not Latinos, there weren't very many
Mm.
Latinos or Latina editors who were editors and publisher in Texas. And she broke many ceilings and never forgot about that. The other piece was she was far beyond NHJ. Any group, every group she would work with, whether it was IRE, NABJ, AJA, student projects, whatever it is, she felt indebted to developing next generation. It wasn't just about Latino journalists, but certainly within NHJ, she had a very special place for us because she was always present at the convention, speaking, helping, taking time. So, and I think again, Jill, what you were saying, the personal side of her, I think is what stands out to everybody because it's so lacking in many places now, particularly now and what's happening in the media, that we forget about that. That wasn't Dee Dee, and we need to embrace that. Thank you.
Here, here. Okay. All right. Anybody want to second that or add one last comment about that? Okay. All right. Well, I think we await further developments on honoring her services and all of that. But we really, I mean, just from what we've heard and read about from people who knew her and even people who didn't know her that well, we've lost somebody that we care deeply about. So thank you all for those tributes. Now I want to move on now to our main issue here, which is student journalists of color in these times of anti-immigration and anti-DEI actions by federal, state, and local authorities. And we want to also discuss other aspects of life for this next generation of professional journalists of color. What problems are they having? Are they receiving enough help? And what do the rest of us need to know? So I want to start off with we have a panel here. Our first panelist is Kendal Wright. And Kendal has it's quite a story to tell. And that is, she was editor of 1956, which is a magazine, a black magazine at the University of Alabama. And the university decided to end it. At that, and also Alice magazine, which was focused on women's issues. But the both publications are going to return, maybe perhaps under new names, because people contributed money to get them going again without the university. So I want to ask Kendal just to expand on that and tell us her perspective on what that says about not only the University of Alabama, but the state of student journals of color in general. So Kendal, the floor is yours. Your 3 minutes. And
Hi,
welcome.
thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to say that first and foremost, while the university's decision was quite heartbreaking and it was something that took me by surprise, it was a announcement that I had received as soon as I returned back from Thanksgiving break. We had just successfully launched our fall issue. I was really excited to get started on our spring issue. I had already had the theme and everything in mind. So kind of getting back and just kind of being like, was just unbelievably shocked to hear about the university's decision. But I think it speaks a lot to the things that are going on, not just in the country, but in the state as well. This wasn't our first run-in with anti-DEI discrimination. Just the year prior, the state had passed State Bill 129, which resulted in the removal of the Black Student Union office on campus, as well as other diversity-based places on campus, including Queer Student Association, lots of safe
Christian
spaces for those
Association.
communities. Yes.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so it was very disheartening. And after hearing that news, it was already kind of hard enough to operate as a diversity-based organization and media publication. So we were always trying to keep in mind, that something like this, I never thought anything like this would have been a possibility, but the fact that the university decided to go off to my knowledge and opinion on a whim and just decide to remove our publications was deeply disheartening. But even more than that, I'm extremely grateful to Masthead, the organization that banded together to further our visions and bolster a fundraiser that was extremely successful, from which we actually just finished production, and our issues for both magazines, both 63, which is our new name, and Celine, the new Alice, are super excited to publish.
Why did you choose the name 63?
Okay, so the initial publication, 1956, was named after the year Autherine Lucy was the first Black student to successfully come or to enroll at the University of Alabama. And she was only there for, I believe, 3 days before they rescinded her application and forced her to leave campus. And in 1963, Vivian Malone and James Hood followed in her footsteps just 7 years later. And if you are all familiar with the Stand in the Schoolhouse Doors, were able to successfully enroll in the university. And Vivian Malone was therefore able to complete her 4-year degree after that. So I wanted to pay homage to the initial publication, and not just the publication, but Autherine Lucy, and honor her legacy that none of us Black students or students of color at the University of Alabama would have been able to be here without her. And so 63 would not be able to be here without 1956.
All right, all right. Now, there's some other students who are here from the University of Alabama. Why don't you all raise your hands? Those from who are also from the university. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't see everybody in the on one screen. Let's see. Okay. Well, the reason I asked is I wondered whether anybody wanted to add to that, or whether others may have had questions. I see George Daniels is here, who's a professor down there at the University of Alabama, and who is looking at this whole subject. All right, Sophie Burkus has her hand raised. Sophie, please take the floor.
Hey, sorry, I'm a student at UA, and I was honestly just really excited about the opportunity to be on this call and just to really be able to hear all y'all's stories.
Okay, that's good enough. George, did you want to add anything to what Kendall just said?
Richard, thank you so much for giving our students an opportunity to tell the story of what's going on with the magazines here at the university, but also students like Sophie who are coming behind them, who are starting their journalism experiences by listening in, covering, and extending what we've been talking about in the class. We talked about this subject a lot in the class. From the faculty perspective, there are a number of issues that come into play when it comes to what we're teaching, the positioning of the magazine now as a non-university unit, but there's also a responsibility that we have as in faculty to prepare students for the real world and to help them understand the conundrum that the university face when it comes to compliance with federal policies, state policies, but also we as faculty who need to make sure our students are ready for what it means to really work in the magazine industry. But the other piece of this that I think we will hope to bring more attention to is what was in 1956, that it's not just a Black magazine or a student magazine that targeted the issues of African American students. It's also an opportunity for messaging what the experiences of African American students at a university that only a short time ago, as Kendall mentioned, didn't recognize, didn't even welcome Black students. And so I think that there has to be a lot more said about that. I see opportunities for conversations beyond our campus, and we hope that our students are going to learn even more from what's happened.
Okay. For those who don't know, explain what you meant by standing in the schoolhouse door.
So Kendall mentioned earlier that in 1963, on June 11th, George Wallace made good, I'll put that in air quotes, on a promise from his inaugural address that same year. The inaugural address in January of 63 is where he said, segregation now, segregation forever. You've probably heard that in the American history. But he came to Tuscaloosa. It was one of the biggest media events in the history of the university because he was going to refuse the admission of Vivian Malone and James Hood. James Hood and Vivian Malone did begin their classes. James Hood did not end up completing his degree initially there, but Vivian Malone very much did. And so that stand at Foster Auditorium, which is still standing today, is an important milestone in civil rights history because the university was one of the last major universities to allow African American students to enroll. But we have to also look at the larger issues of whether they are enrolling, are they being successful? Are they graduating? And we see that now in greater numbers. But it's always a red watershed moment. We celebrate, we mark that anniversary periodically. I've been here 23 years. We've had at least three celebrations, commemorations, if you will. So that's why it's so very, very important.
Here, here. Okay. All right. Teresa Puente. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Hey,
Uh,
that's great.
Okay, all right.
We
Well,
got
give
it.
us your perspective out from out there in California on this whole issue of,
Yeah. Hi,
yeah.
thank you for having me. It's my first time in this Zoom room, so it's great to see some new faces and familiar ones. So I teach journalism here, and in 2019 I started with my students the first Spanish language magazine in Long Beach, California, and in fact the only source of Spanish language news coming out of Long Beach.
Hmm.
And about 3 years ago, we pivoted to being a bilingual magazine, in part because not all Latinos read Spanish. And so we have a unique magazine. It's flippable. One side you read English, one side the other in Spanish. And since we started, we just picked up a bunch of statewide and national awards last month at the ACP CCMA conference. So I'm
Okay.
really proud of the work we're doing. What I'm doing, I also created the first bilingual journalism class here at Cal State Long Beach and one of a handful like it in the country. I'm training next gen Latinx journalists to do culturally competent reporting. Um, and we were doing this, before the intensity of ICE raids impacted our community. How close has it gotten to our community? They raided a car wash 3 blocks from campus. They've raided a church 3 blocks from where I live. So here in Southern California, like other parts of the country, we live with this fear um, just for being brown. Regardless of whether you're have DACA students who ha and their families who have very real concerns, but even you have the privilege of being a U.S. citizen, it's a very real fear that you're just going to get pulled over. And it's not something new necessarily to communities of color. It's something that communities of color have experienced, but now it's just in a new context. So we have covered the ICE raids. In fact, I had a student for our last issue do looking at one particular car wash. Another story that we did was looking at how kind of an art story, but how DJs were raising funds and awareness for a family where the father was detained. So there's just some examples of the type of coverage we've done. But I also am teaching the students. I'm also trained in solutions journalism. Shout out to anybody who's a part of that network. We actually got a grant from them a couple years ago too, that not just to cover immigration from a crisis perspective, um, we're really trying to show stories of immigrant business owners. So we had two stories on the Honduran community and local business owners and how they're contributing. So a lot of the dominant media narrative is about undocumented immigrants and stereotypes around criminality. We're really working to break those stereotypes and tell stories of our community. So far, my heart is with the Alabama students. I've actually had that fear. What if they come for our funding? I'm in California, which is more of a blue state. So far, we're okay. But that does not mean the administration isn't, something could happen. So I'm also looking for backup sources of funding just in case we get to that. But so far, we're okay with funding. We're fully funded by the university. And also, what we've been doing. Just more largely on campus, I'm part of a Latinx faculty and staff group and also part of our faculty union. We've had a lot of different know your rights trainings on campus. So what to do if you get pulled over by ICE or ICE comes to campus. I'm actively working with a group of faculty to have a plan, and what we fear is just an eventuality. So there's been a lot of organizing and just trying to again one thing that we're working on organizing, working with a professor in creative writing, we're going to do a reading of student voices. His students do poetry. In my class, in addition to reporting, they do essays and op-eds. So we'll do a reading, fiction, nonfiction, just to create awareness and to highlight immigrant voices. And I'll just end with a lot of what my students are dealing with is just fear. I had the first week of class, a student contact me, Professor, I can't come today. ICE is in my neighborhood. My mom picks my little brother up from school. I can't let her leave the house, so I'm going to go do that. And just this last week, a student said, I'm really struggling. Lots going on, including a family member who's been detained. So we've got a lot of extra stress that our students are dealing with, and we are really just hoping that our biggest fear really for the campus is that ICE is going to show up. It hasn't happened yet, knock wood, and that's what we're most concerned about. I'll stop there. Thanks for letting
Okay,
me
thank
share.
you, thank you. Um, All right, Nasifa Ahmed is with us as well, and she's a current scholarship recipient from the South Asian Journalists Association, who's been reporting both in Canada and the United States. So, Nasifa, why don't you give us your perspective on this?
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So I am at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism based in New York City, and a lot of my friends in the program uh, are not US citizens. I happen to be when I was born in New York and grew up in Canada, so I have the privilege of dual citizenship, and that's something that I want to bring up because I think there's a bit more nuance and there's a spectrum of risk that people of color face within our communities. And that risk comes from not only citizenship, but race, the geographic location that you're living in. I was thinking because Columbia University recently had a student that was kidnapped by ICE on campus. And I live around this area, so there were helicopters in the air and everything. And a couple of my colleagues who are at the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, they were reporting on the ground um, as as it was happening. Many of them are not citizens, so there's a risk that they're taking on their own personal safety when they're reporting on topics live, which is important because that's what we're supposed to do as reporters, be on the ground to cover things like this. But if we're worried about our safety, can we go into these spaces and give a story? With, and are we putting ourselves at risk, or are we kind of isolating ourselves from certain stories because we're worried about our safety? I want to share a link to a piece that my friend wrote, where she chronicled the fears of student journalists in New York City, particularly who are international students. And what she did was that she interviewed a couple of them and asked them, have things changed for you for your reporting interests? And some have in that piece have said, I'm wary to when I cover controversial topics because I don't know if it will come back at me. And as journalists, that's kind of where we're headed towards. But there's an acknowledgement of certain groups and people of color who face that greater risk. The second thing that I would like to say is that last summer I had the privilege of being a Diverse Voices in Science Journalism intern at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So I come from a science background, and that informs a lot of the work that I do. However, during that past summer, I don't know if you remember the news cycle, but Trump was cutting NIH grants and a lot of research funding across the country. And particularly if any, there was a mention of DEI or anything that pertains to like inclusion and certain keywords. And what that did for me as a science reporter in particular, I was wondering, and it was a little bit funny because my internship was a Diverse Voices in Science Journalism internship, writing about diverse communities at a time when there were cuts. So I think the immediate risk that we're facing is to our safety, our physical safety when reporting on topics, and our future as well if we do report on topics and there's a risk on that. But I think that a greater risk that is kind of being overlooked at times is the beat itself. Are we able to report on our communities without feeling as though that it won't exist anymore? The topics that we would like to write about, particularly in science journalism, there's a lot of great research happening around the country, relating to DEI, bringing opportunities two communities. I because I was in Washington, D.C., I was able to attend an event where researchers from all over the country came and who had their grants terminated recently. And we were, as a reporter, I was talking to them, like, what is your plan? And a lot of them said, hey, it's been 3 years we've been working on this. And this DEI program in particular really helped this community. However, we're going to have to stop right now, and that's it. So maybe that's the story I would write, with the headline and the lead and the nut graph, talking about the cut. But then, what now? It's cut in a couple years. What am I going to write about as a person of color who wants to cover these topics, right? So that's kind of what I've been seeing, um, in relation to this. And finally, my final point is that certain beats are at more at risk than others. I do think that that is true. However, as someone who is going into business reporting in particular, I was reading, I'll find it and post it in the chat, but there was an article that a New York Times reporter wrote about Minneapolis in particular, and how business and slowed down because of the raids, and people weren't going out as much, and there was a struggle to get communities out again. And that is a business story, but once again, it is a story about ICE and about people of color who are fearful. And I don't remember who the reporter was on this, but I was thinking, if I was assigned that story, how would I go about writing that, um, as someone who does have citizenship, who does have that privilege, but is a person of color, right? So these are some things that I am keeping in mind. And I think a lot about my classmates in particular who aren't citizens, who are doing this work with greater risk than I am. And I wonder how they're coping. And Jacqueline, who my classmate, who I put the link in, she did a great job kind of summarizing it. So I'd recommend giving that piece a read, if you can. But thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Okay, now I see that Charlayne Hunter-Gault is with us now, and I want to particularly, we talked a minute ago, George Daniels talked a minute ago about standing in the schoolhouse door at the University of Alabama, and we that's a good segue into what happened at the University of Georgia, where Charlayne and Hamilton Holmes integrated the university in 1961. But there's more to the story, and that is about not just integrating the University of Georgia, but integrating the University of Georgia's student newspaper. So I wanted Charlayne to talk a little bit about that and to welcome her into the conversation. So
Well,
Charlayne,
th
yeah,
thank you so much. It's taken me a little while to get in because
I know.
I'm a lot older than most of your participants here. And
No
so I'm
worries.
really happy to be hearing from them and to be a part of this. I actually want to say that Hamilton Holmes, who was the other African American student who went into the University of Georgia with me, and I want to say we desegregated. We did not integrate
Okay.
because it has taken years for the university to integrate, but they have now uh, integrated, and I am very happy with the work that's going on in the journalism department, journalism college, and from time to time they write me and say, "Well, what about this and what about that?" But I am very excited about this younger generation, and I just want to say to them that, when I was at the University of Georgia, uh, as again, we didn't integrate, we desegregated. And when I went into work, I was so excited because I wanted to be a journalist from day one. And when I went into the journalism area where they were working, and by the way, Tom Johnson, who later became head of CNN, was a student there, and he was very receptive to my participating in the local in the school newspaper, but nobody would work with me. And so after a while, I thought, well, I really need this work. I need this experience. And I found out that Julian Bond, I don't know if any of you will remember him, but if you don't, look him up because he's a historic figure. Julian Bond and Carl Holman, another historic figure, had decided to start their own newspaper because even the Black newspaper was not covering the student movement. And that was because it was it was there were white people who owned that newspaper. And so they kept the so-called Black newspaper from writing too many things about Black people that was positive. And so Carl Holman and Julian Bond started this newspaper, and I would go home every weekend. I'd drop my clothes off 70 miles from Athens, Georgia, where University of Georgia was from Atlanta. I would go in, I'd drop my bag at my mother's house, and I'd keep on going to Carl Holman's basement. And that's where the students who were demonstrating to open up the schools as well as restaurants and everything else that was segregated in Atlanta, they would demonstrate, get arrested, and then come to Carl Holman's basement and tell their stories. And that's where I would sit and I would write, I would type out what they were telling us. But then that was very interesting and important to do. But I got tired of sitting in the basement. So at one point I said to Carl, could I go outside and write some of the things that are happening, having seen them? And they agreed to that. And so I spent a lot of time. The first time I did a story, I called the woman who was head of the whatever it was, I can't remember at the moment, but she was white woman who was in charge of all of this. And I called her to ask why were they segregating, continuing to segregate. And what was amazing to me and a very inspirational moment was that she actually took my call. And here I am, just a kid from University of Georgia trying to do the best I could, getting journalism in my blood and in my brain and in my body. And she actually took my call. And I think that that was the thing that told me that this is something I need to do, because while the young people who were demonstrating against segregation were demonstrating, here was a white woman who was willing to listen to a Black, well, at that point, I don't know if you could have called me a journalist, but I thought of myself as a journalist. And she actually talked to me. So that really was part of what inspired me to keep on keeping on. And uh, I've never, what's the word I'm looking for? I've never gone away from that notion that it is our job to cover the stories that we think are important. And if they're about people who look like us or people who don't look like us, because there are people who don't look like us who died for us. And I think that's what we also have to remember. When John Lewis was the great civil rights hero, was getting ready on his first trip from Washington, D.C. down south to desegregate the highways, which was still, they were supposed to be desegregated, but they weren't. And he got ready to go down there, and there were white young people who went with him, and they all signed their wills before they left because they weren't sure that they were going to make it, given the violence that was going on at the South at the time. And sure enough, they got to the first place, and John Lewis got out to go in the front door of the rest of the bus stop restaurant. And there were white boys out there who said, no, 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 you got to go around to the back. And then John Lewis started to cite the law. Well, I'm coming on the basis of the law that says that there's no segregation and blah 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 blah. Well, then they beat the living hell, pardon my French, beat the living hell out of John. But some of the white boys who were on the bus with John got off the bus and tried to rescue him from those white kids who were beating him up, and they got beat up too. But eventually, all of that stopped and they continued on their journey. So I think that while it's very difficult these days to talk to a lot of young people who have no idea what that history was that brought us to where we are today, I think it's important what you're doing and what the students who are with us on this program are doing. They need to realize that it's up to them to keep telling the truth as we always have, no matter how difficult it is. And it's getting more and more difficult, as you know. People who are trying to tell the truth now are being intimidated and everything, but we've been here before and we can overcome.
All right. Charlie, I don't know if you know that your camera needs to be moved a little bit so we can see your face. I don't know if you, okay.
Not working well. I don't know what the problem is here.
Okay. While you're doing that, I wonder if anybody has any questions for Charlayne. She has to leave shortly. But anybody have any questions about? Okay, George Daniels does. Okay.
Quick, it's more of a comment.
Yes.
I just want to thank Ms. Hunter-Gault for sharing her story. It was 1997 when I was in the Atlanta television market, and I decided to go back to school to get my master's. The first book I read was In My Place, In My
Oh,
Place.
wow. Oh,
Thank
wow.
you for
You've
what you
made my
did.
day.
Yes, you laid the ground for me, and I was able to finish 2 degrees at UGA's journalism program. And now I'm teaching students like Sophie and Nick. And so this is just wonderful. I thank you for what you did.
Oh, well, this is so wonderful to hear you say that. And I'm glad that you're on this program because I don't know why I can't get my own face up here. It it's been a while. Richard, you didn't tell me how to do this.
Well, Benita, can you help a little bit? Benita,
Huh?
our producer.
Let me just tell you where your camera is pointing to. Your camera is pointing up under on your scarf. I guess, is that a scarf around your neck?
No, it's my vest, my vest.
Okay,
Camera
well
is upside down.
that's what
I
we're seeing.
Yeah,
So
I've
you
done a
need
lot
to,
of these, but you see, when I bend it over this way, I see my fingers on it, but I
yeah,
don't
so
see
you
my
have to
face.
bring the camera up.
Well, I have posted, this is
Your
Don Baker. If you look at Don Baker, I've posted a picture of Charlayne from
Yeah, there's a
1993.
picture, but
Yes.
I have never had this problem. I don't know. I see my this here, but I can't figure out how to get the face up. So y'all can see what an 84-year-old journalist looks like.
Is your camera attached to your computer?
Huh?
Is the camera attached to, or is it internal camera on your
No,
computer?
I do these all the time, but I don't I've never had this problem.
The
Well, that's
camera
okay.
appears to be,
We're loving your nail polish color.
the camera
Sorry.
is upside down, folks. Her camera is
Well,
It is
upside
upside
down.
down.
that's weird.
Oh, it is?
See,
Okay,
I go
that's what
back
it is.
this way and then I come back this way. Let me pull it back this way a little bit and see if that helps. I've never had this problem. I don't know whether y'all are doing this because y'all are so much younger than me. Uh, okay, well, I
Not that
can't.
much younger, Char.
This is so weird. I have done so many of these and I have never had this problem. And I hit share screen, disable share, but then I hit share again and okay, screen. Now I see everybody else. Well,
Huh.
y'all know what I look like. I look like I look in that picture over there that
That's
somebody
right.
put up.
Got it.
Absolutely right. That's why I posted.
Okay.
That's
Anybody else
me.
have any questions for Charlayne? Okay. All right. Well, I thank you very much, and I hope everybody takes your message to heart. I know I do, even though I'm not no longer a student. So that's good.
Well,
Yeah.
let me just say one more thing.
Yes.
And again, I'm sorry that this is not working the way we would like it to
We love
work.
your scarf, though.
But yeah, right. But but I think that we have to, as the word goes, we have to keep on keeping on.
Hmm.
And we have to encourage our young um, people of color, let's say that, as well as those who are not of color, to just get out there and like I'm living in a state right now that is, what shall I say, there's a lot of problems here, racial problems. And I run
What
into
state?
people.
What state?
Florida,
Okay.
Florida.
Go ahead.
And yet I do run into people in the grocery stores and places like that who recognize me from way back, and they say, "Oh, we miss you so much." And I don't take that as a compliment to me necessarily, but one that says that people, if they're telling me they miss me so much, they're saying that they want good news, and they want news that tells people the truth, what is going on in their communities as well as in their countries. But so many of our journalists, work in local areas, and that's very important for them to tell the story of what's going on. I remember I was walking up the street several times here in Florida, and I would look at people and I would smile and nobody would smile back at me.
Mm.
And so I wrote an article about it, and the local paper published it.
Mm.
And we got a lot of reaction to it, saying, why is it that people look at me in the street and look the other way and don't speak? I said, I grew up in the South, and it was segregated, but you would not walk past somebody white if you were black, and you would walk past somebody white, and most of the time they would speak. So I'm not promoting racism by any chance, but I'm just saying that even when we had segregation as the law, there was still people who would recognize you and speak to you in the street. And that's why I wrote that article, because we are so far past that point, and yet this is something we still have to deal with. And that's why I'm so happy that you're having this conversation with young journalists and somewhat older ones as well, like me and you. But it's really important for all of us to keep on keeping on, and to get out there and talk to people who are having difficulty paying their rent or paying their light bills or whatever. But this is we have to know there've been difficult times, and we've gotten past them, and now we're in a more difficult time. Another, shall I say, not a more difficult time, but another difficult time. And it's up to us journalists, whether we're old or middle aged or young or whatever it is, to try and inform people about what is going on in our world, as well as in our country, as well as in our communities. Because who else is going to do that if we don't?
Here, here. Okay. Cynthia Robbins has her hand up. Cynthia. Oh, there you are.
Well, I want to thank, even upside down or only part of her shirt showing, what a privilege it is to hear from the icon Charlayne Hunter-Gault, and to hear about her guidance to us all. I'm in between her and the young students who are still in school. But I wanted to share, and I'm not a journalist. I am a civil rights lawyer who is licensed but not really practicing, but still advocating for racial justice and our democracy, which is very much imperiled. And journalists have such a critical role, especially now, in protecting it. But I wanted to just share when I was a student, an undergrad at Harvard, the Harvard Crimson is a well-regarded student publication. And that is a newspaper that was publishing, had racist policies and racist articles. They even had a policy that students of color could not cover events in our own communities. Journalists who were on the Crimson couldn't cover Black students, couldn't cover Black student events, et cetera, because we would be biased. And
Wow.
it's like, well, they didn't have a rule that white students couldn't cover white student events, and what did that even mean? And
Cynthia,
so
what years are we talking about?
we're talking about the late 70s into the early 80s.
Okay.
And what we as student activists did as a group of students of color, we unified and we went in with a series of grievances on a Friday afternoon. We did sort of a quiet takeover. They basically said, we're here until policies change. And we ended up with a one week, one Friday a year, a month. We had a whole page in the Crimson that we were editorially responsible for. We got the policy change that students of color could cover events that were being put on by organizations for students of color. We also had them, I don't, it's been a while. I don't remember all of the concessions that were made, but I think the point I'm trying to share is that we have to stand up. And I really appreciate what Nazifa said. This is a different time. We felt like, we were concerned, but we didn't feel like we might be deported or that we might be arrested or that we might be disappeared. And I think that's not an invalid concern now. Nevertheless, we have to stand up and we have to, and we see what's happening even in Minnesota as two people have been killed. Many others have stood up and have changed some of what's going on there. So I want to just encourage and say how happy I am to hear about the students who came at Alabama, came around with a whole new strategy to fund their publications and just keep on keeping on.
Here, here. Okay. Thank you, Cynthia.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I see. Now, Ronnie Thomas has his hand up too from at Morehouse.
Hi, how are you, Richard? You're one of the few people who call me Ronnie, who's not a member of my family, but it's
Oh,
it's
I'm
quite all
sorry.
right. We've known each other so long that it makes sense anyway. So, cousin Richard, I'm glad to be. So I teach at Morehouse, and I've been there for 19 years. And I had an interesting conversation come up in my class a few days ago, which really at first surprised me in a disappointing way, but then I realized it may be really a sign of young journalists and the potential that they have at a HBCU. I was a sports writer for 34 years before I went to Morehouse, and I wrote a book. Well, I'll give myself yes, I'll plug it. It's called "They Cleared the Lane," about the first Black players in the NBA. And so we were talking about it, and I have this section in there about the first Black superstars. And so I made someone made a reference to Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, one of the students raised his hand, and he said, "I don't believe Chamberlain scored 100 points." And I was just dumbfounded. That is just one of the great feats in sports history, and everybody knows about it who's a basketball fan. But I asked him why, and I was asking the class because several members of the class agreed with him. And another student said, "Well, there's no video, there's no film," and certainly that's representative of their generation. And then somebody else said, "Well, who played in that game who's still alive?" And so I was really shocked by all this. And I explained to them, well, there's certain, back then, I think it was 1962, there weren't a lot of teams probably didn't even have television contracts. And that particular game was played in a little town called Hershey, Pennsylvania. So I'm sure there was no TV then there of that game. And but more I thought about it, I thought in a way this is a good sign about how the way the media is now, the way Trump has attacked it, its credibility. One thing it's created is that our students really are skeptical of so many things that come up in society now. And I think in the long run, with the teaching they receive in at journalism programs, we can turn that skepticism into teaching them, well, how do you test whether something is true or not? And talk about the importance of, questioning what some people may take for granted or some people may not examine, particularly the way the Trump administration throws out figures. I often think about when Trump was complaining that it was stating that his first inauguration drew more people than Obama, and all you had to do was get a picture of the crowd, and you could see that wasn't true. But a lot of people, at least his followers, would have just taken it for granted for truth because he said it. So I'm hoping that this type of skepticism that the fake news claims and so on has probably implanted in our students will really help them become better journalists and maybe great investigative journalists. And one this I brought a student with me, Richard, Elijah Qualls, who's with our
Yes.
news site called the Maroon Tiger. And he's gotten involved in some investigative reporting, and I just thought it'd be nice to have him give his opinion. We haven't talked about this, so I don't know what he's going to say, but he's a really bright student and a very promising journalist.
Well,
Thank you.
I'd like to add, I think that's a wonderful statement that you just made, and it made me think about uh, something that happened here. As I said earlier, I'm in Florida, and I was at an all black, predominantly black middle school, and I was talking about my life and so forth, and um, I mentioned someone back in the history days. It was the year that the civil rights movement, Dr. King and all of those were involved. And when we walked out, the students hadn't heard about any of this, and the teacher was black. And when it was all over, she was walking me to my car, and she said, um, I really thought you did a great job. She said, but could I make a confession? I said, sure. She said, I didn't know what the 1965 uh, law was either. I mean, she had no idea about what had led to the end of official end of segregation. This is a black teacher who had to be in her 30s or mid 30s, I would say, and she didn't have the history.
Hmm.
And so, part of, I think, our responsibility is getting that history out there in one way or another. I mean, it has to be creative. We can be creative. We have to be creative, but we also we have to do education. We have to provide education because if this is the case, and this was just a couple of years ago, that this black teacher had never heard what led to the end of segregation officially, what what is our responsibility to her as well as to her students? It's just amazing how little information is out there about our history. And I think that the journalists have as much of a responsibility to getting that out as do the educators, because the educators, many of them are like the teacher who told me she had no idea what the 54 decision was about.
Okay. John Yearwood has his hand raised.
Hi, Richard. Hi, Charlayne.
Hey.
Charlayne, it's always good to see you, whether you're upside down or right side up. And let me just say that I know you've been through a lot, and not only in this country, because I remember chatting with you in South Africa maybe 2 decades ago, and you spent some time there and
Right.
experienced what was happening in South Africa at a hopeful time, at its new dawn, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, I'm going to ask you a question that a lot of people have asked me about journalism, particularly at this time, is that are you optimistic about what you're seeing? Certainly, when you look at the landscape of American journalism today, it brings up the question, are you optimistic about the future of journalism in this country or not?
That's a really challenging question. Um, I am in a way, uh, because I get a lot of requests from people to come and talk to young journalists, and I can't always do it because I've been struggling with a knee replacement for about a year. And so a lot of the things that I normally would have done, I can't do right now because I can't travel that much. But I think that there are students who are interested in being journalists. And in fact, I have a one young person who went to University of Georgia. She's now working somewhere else, and she was in touch with me early on. And every time she has an issue, I get an email from her, And so I think it's important for those of us who've been around for a while to be available to talk to young people who get frustrated. Like now, this is one of the most frustrating times I can remember, with people who are in leadership blasting the media in really ugly ways. And I, I I'd like to hear from all of you how you think our young people ought to be responding to this, because sometimes the words that I use when I hear a certain person on television talking, what, I just start to curse. I mean, there's no other way I can deal with it other than to say, "Go F yourself," you know. But I'm not going to write it like that. I think the thing to do is to have journalists continue to do what we've always done, which is to tell the truth as we see it and to talk to people who can give us the truth and write those stories as they convey them to us. I think that's really important.
Okay, Elijah Qualls, your name was brought into the conversation. Uh, uh, can you give us your perspective on this?
Yes, so first off, good evening or good day wherever you may be. My name is Elijah Qualls. I'm a junior political science and journalism double major here at Morehouse College. Um,
Oh, Morehouse.
yes, ma'am. But at the end of the day, whatever my major may be, I'm a writer, right? And so that's what led me to journalism. And then being engaged with the Maroon Tiger, our school newspaper here on campus, I've been exposed to some interesting interactions, but especially within the journalism department as well, and trying to bring in that scholarship to other areas on campus. It's interesting. I was speaking with one of our journalism professors today because she's leading a history of the Black press class. And so we're currently studying Samuel Cornish and John B. Russwurm of the Freedom's Journal. Um, and we're talking about the ACS, the American Colonization Society, and the move towards Liberia and this idea of colonization in Liberia. And I brought that scholarship into another classroom, and my professor didn't receive it very well, which is interesting because he teaches, African politics. And once he heard that it was a journalism class and that was the context that we were learning it, it almost seemed like he took it less seriously. And I bring that up because this seems to be a general school of thought that we're currently wrestling with here at Morehouse College is our college is struggling to understand what journalism is and how it's being shaped and reshaped going forward. So I wrote an article recently. It was very contentious about our college deciding to commemorate and honor Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism. Um, they hung up a portrait in the chapel, and many students were against this. And we distributed this paper on the day of our president's inauguration. President Bowman, he was getting inaugurated. It just so happened that those days lined up. We received a lot of pushback from the college. We even got approached by, campus police about it. And so it's just kind of alarming sometimes to see your institution that you think, would stand with you and support the pursuit of higher education and the pursuit of your major in specifics. Um, it was just a little bit alarming. And so I think when we're looking at how to pursue journalism in the future, I do think it's really important to look at the history of things. Um, you know, this history of the Black press class has been very informative to me, and I think it's really important that we are able to effectively contextualize what journalism is so that we can effectively communicate what it's supposed to be. I think particularly, of course, I look at it through the lens of Black journalism. I interned for the Afro over the summer in Baltimore and Washington, D.C., and I just really think now more than ever, journalists of color need to step in and continue to help people, like I said, contextualize the current scene. I think
Right.
sometimes we like to operate in our own respective bubbles. Oh, that doesn't relate to me. I'm going to go, protect my peace or however you want to call it. But I think people really need to understand that all people should be in conversation. And I think the Black press really helps depict that. When we're looking at the international scene and we're looking at, Frederick Douglass, we're looking at W.E.B. Du Bois, they're talking about the international scene, relating things, what's happening in America to the rest of the world. But even now, still, we look at what's happening in Israel with the in Gaza and things of that nature. Even with Ukraine and Russia. So I just think it's really important for us to understand our responsibility as journalists of color to continue to provide our insight and help people understand certain necessary history that maybe has been omitted from their education and their upbringing. Morehouse College has really opened my eyes. I came from PWIs my whole life. And so stepping into the HBCU space really helped me understand what it means to be Black, but especially what it means to be, a Black writer in America in 2026.
Right. That's wonderful. That I'm so happy to hear you because you give me hope.
I've got a
You,
question, Elijah. Why did they want to honor Joseph Smith?
Yeah, so the article is very interesting. I can drop the link in the chat if you guys would like to read it. I'm still receiving phone calls from Morehouse alums asking me to edit it, saying that I didn't do my due diligence as a reporter. It's a whole thing. I spoke with the dean of the chapel. He is
Yeah.
the one who's responsible for kind of deciding what portraits get hung up and which don't. And he explained to me the nuance, but the overall message he was trying to get me to understand is as Black Christians, it is our responsibility to forgive. And he had made he had made the argument to me that Joseph Smith was a very important figure in the emancipation and mass exception of Black people.
Really?
Um, right. My thoughts exactly, but I was like, he's the historian. Let me not disrespect. And at the end of the day, as a journalist, it's my job to help people understand where he's coming from. Just trying to
yeah.
gain his perspective.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, do with it what you may. Right. So it was very interesting. Yeah, I'll go get that link right now so you guys can check it out. Maybe we'll do a follow up because I think they haven't hung it up yet, but I think they still want to. So.
See, okay.
Yeah, it's
We
very
got some other people
interesting.
with their hands up. Mark Rochester is one. Since you mentioned Sarasota, that's where Mark is. Go ahead, Mark. Mark? Uh-oh. His hand is
Sorry,
raised.
I had to unmute myself.
Oh, okay.
Um, so yes, so I am down here in Sarasota. Uh, Florida can be a lonely place, let me tell you. But one of the great things about Sarasota is Sarasota, and I didn't know this till I moved down here. Sarasota has a huge Black middle class. Lots of Black professionals here. Um, I remember being here just a couple of months, and I went to
Oh yeah, tell us why you're in Sarasota in the first place.
well, up until a few weeks ago, I was the executive editor of the Sarasota Herald Tribune.
Okay.
Not to put a downer on this conversation, but I got fired a couple of weeks ago for reasons I still don't understand, and the company hasn't explained to me. But I was removed from my job a few weeks ago, which is unfortunate, not for me, but just because there are so few Black executive editors in the country. I don't know exactly what the number is, but I'm sure it's less than 10. Um, and going back to talking about Dee Dee and the importance of representation in this business, because I have to tell you, there is such a hunger especially among people of color, to have our stories told, um, to have balance and truth in local journalism. I would go speak at public events, particularly with Black community organizations here, and most of them had no idea until I showed up that the editor of the paper was Black. And when they saw me walk through the door to be the evening speaker, they were like, "How did you get that job? We didn't know, we didn't know there was anybody Black at the newspaper." I was like, "Well, there aren't many, but there are some, and there are other folks who have important jobs besides myself." But the idea that there are so few of us who are in positions to tell, or who are in a position to decide what stories get told and what issues get covered. I think about some of the stories we did while I was here that definitely would not have happened if I hadn't been sitting in the big chair and deciding what got covered and what didn't. We certainly would not have done stories about police misconduct, about um, Black residents who died at the hands of police, um, about um, political decisions here that would have an adverse effect on Black and Hispanic residents here. Um, just issues that really affect our quality of life just would not have been covered if I hadn't insisted on that coverage, or had I not given reporters who were traditionally not given opportunities to tell ambitious uh, enterprise stories. Newspapers in particular are still havens for only the stars in the newsroom get the good stories. And I always try to make sure that everyone got the opportunity to tell great, ambitious stories. And it made a big difference in the kinds of journalism that several reporters did. Because I know when I got here, I kept hearing from the signing editors, well, so and so doesn't deserve the opportunity to do that great story, or they haven't earned the right to do that investigative story. And I'm like, but don't ever say that again in this newsroom. Don't talk about people having to earn the right to do what reporters are supposed to do. And so, representation is greatly important, more important than ever these days, particularly with the current administration in Washington. But just thinking about Dee Dee again, that's something that I know she strongly believed in and she fought for. And she was with us when we launched. I worked with the Cronkite School at ASU to launch an investigative editor training program. And Dee Dee was a huge supporter of that. She got the IRE board um, to work with ASU on getting that program launched and lining up candidates to get enrolled in that program. So she not only talked the talk, she walked the walk. Um, she met with industry folks about providing more training opportunities, especially for journalists of color. She was a big believer in that. I hope that's one of the ways. I hope that's one of the reasons she will be remembered by the industry as someone who didn't just talk about diversity or diversifying the industry. She did things about it.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, thank you. Gerald,
Wait, I want to ask him, was he the editor that published my piece?
I'll be honest, I'm getting older. I don't exactly remember when that was.
I don't remember either. I have
If
it
it was
over
if
here.
it was in the last 2 years, then yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Sounds like you might have.
okay. All right, Gerald Jordan's got his hand up as well. Gerald, good to see you. Are you unmuted?
Yeah,
Okay.
there are a
Okay.
couple of things I want to see if I can pull together
But
from
first
both.
of all, identify yourself a little more.
I'm a retired faculty from the University of Arkansas School of Journalism and Strategic Media. Before then, I was on the staff of the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Boston Globe, and the Kansas City Star.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had about equal time in both worlds there, and enjoyed it thoroughly. It was just time to say goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Uh, I was going to throw Ron a little curve, but he peeped my whole card by saying where the game took place. But if you ever want to win an argument, if you're of a certain age, if you ever want to win an argument in a bar and say, I was in the Garden the night that Wilt scored 100 points, people know immediately that you're lying because it was not in Madison Square Garden. It was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And I raised that not only as just an old man or a dad's joke, but to also say how important it is for the current generation. And I know you guys can work the internet, you can work sources, you can go online and find stuff that Lord, an Egyptologist couldn't dig up. I want you to use that skill, that ability to multi-check. I won't even say double check, to multi-check everything you're reporting on, because there is so much misinformation, disinformation, and uh, uh, false stories put forth today, not only by unethical PR people, and I'm not taking a shot at PR people, but unethical folks who work at that, but also by our elected officials. I mean, everything is just fact. It just rolls off their tongue without any verification. And the thing that I spent all of my 27 years in the classroom drilling into students' head was, we are not stenographers. We are reporters. Anybody can stand there with a microphone, a recorder, a tablet, and just write down what you're told and then turn around and pass it along as truth. And when you do that, you lose life. So all the young folk who are working on your college papers, or you're working summer internships, or you're starting your career, for God's sake, go at the research in the same way that you go after games and looking for funny things on TikTok and to line up a date for the weekend. Just be that diligent about finding good information, and not
Right.
one source, many sources,
Mhm.
so that you can publish or present whatever is the best obtainable version of the truth. If you leave here tonight with nothing else, please take that with you. And next time you're in the garden, look up and you see the banner where Wilt scored 100.
Okay. All right. Hazel Trizedne's hand is up as well.
Hello, everybody. There's so much rolling around in my head from the conversation. But I would want to first thank Charlayne
Oh, you
Hunter-Gault.
got to identify yourself too. I'm sorry.
Oh, Hazel Trice Edney, editor-in-chief of the Trice Edney Newswire, and president CEO of Trice Edney Communications. I also teach at the Kathy Hughes School of Communications, and that's where I wanna go there. But I teach multicultural media history, and a great part of that, of course, is the Black press, because I've spent my entire career in the Black press, and I want to tell Charlayne Hunter-Gault, I want to thank her for being such an inspiration to me. I met her in South Africa during the World Conference Against Racism, and I was horrified to interview her. That's the only interview I ever thought about that I was actually intimidated because of her greatness. And that is what I think each one of us as journalists should realize, especially as seasoned, I don't want to say senior journalists, but as seasoned journalists, that young people need to see us. And I'm not that much younger than Charlayne. It's just that she was known for her greatness. And it's so important that when students look at us, that we recognize who we are to them, and that we not be ashamed to share some of what we've gone through, some of the rejections, some of the stories that were successful. They need to hear from us. And that is what I have found to be impactful in the classes that I have taught at Howard. In fact, I had a conversation, Richard, based on just this coming up, this particular roundtable coming up. I had a conversation with my class because I went and I read that story that was on News One about Howard students rethinking their careers in journalism. So I asked them, is this true? And some of them, they said, well, to a certain extent, but it wasn't because of what was stated in that article. That article said it's because of what happened to Don Lemon, et cetera, and they're afraid. They said it's because they don't have the kinds of mentors that we talk about in the classroom. Where are the George Careys? Where are the Simeon Bookers? Joy Reid was put off the air. Yes, that bothered them, but how can they learn how to fight like that? And we have all of that right here, and we should not deny them that. They're looking for mentors, and they are looking for internships. That was another thing that they said. They can't find good internships, strong internships that will really teach them how to leave the doors as a journalist. And so there's a whole lot more I could add that they said.
Wait a minute. Well, let me ask this then, Hazel.
Yes.
What about the faculty members? Aren't they supposed to be the mentors?
They are, but they can't mentor 30, 40, all of the students. And so they, unfortunately, they look to the New York Timeses and the Washington Post as the great hope. And so I tried to steer them to, I have a degree from Harvard University because of my work in the Black press. I came out of Harvard and decided to go back to the Black press when the Washington Post had offered me a position. I shared that with them because I want them to know that there is a place for them in journalism, and they don't have to try to choose the great white hopes. There's nothing wrong with the Washington Post and the New York Times. We need to be everywhere. That's what I tell them. But at the same time, they can someday establish their own once they learn how to be journalists. And I also tell them that it is so important for them to ask somebody to become their mentor. As a professor, I've had hundreds and hundreds of students. You can't mentor them all, but you can mentor them for that moment that they are in your class. And that's what I try to do.
All right. Now
That point is so well taken. This is Dorothy Bland from the University of North
Yes.
Texas. And I really appreciate, thank you for pulling this together, and it's been delightful listening. But I also want you to know that I have two students with me from the University
Yay.
of North Texas. And what are you guys thinking?
My name is Reagan Barrett, by the way. I'm an graduate student in journalism at the University of North Texas. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has spoken. This has been so informative. And I really do appreciate hearing all of you guys' history and perspectives. I think it's very crucial for young minds such as myself going into the journalism field to hear these viewpoints. Honestly, even coming from the University of North Texas, we've also dealt with some trials and tribulations. Here recently, not too long ago, a exhibition, Victor Quinones's art exhibition, he had sort of put out an exhibition that carries a lot of immigration themes, and it was censored by the university. This was not something that the student body wanted. It was actually something that the student body protested against very fervently, and we have yet to receive the proper transparency that we require for why this was taken down. So I really do appreciate everything that has been said. It is really kind of drilling into my mind and making it even more apparent that someone's headline is also another person's reality and what they live through each day. And so I once again wanted to say thank you, and I'm happy to be here.
Well,
Yes,
thanks for that observation.
yes,
I want to
and
hear more about that. Go ahead.
More details to come, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I am Shannon Todd. It is very amazing sitting into this and listening to all of you guys just pour wisdom onto us, especially coming from a perspective of someone who is recently taken interest in this and only started just a couple months ago. Um, I am more on the broadcast media side. I major in converged broadcast media, so I'm interested in becoming a news anchor, TV personality, and creating packages. Recently, I just had an encounter with our television station here at the University of North Texas. We have we have our student government campaigns going on here on campus. I covered we have a Unite campaign, which is basically focused on transparency and bringing different cultures and basically uniting the UNT campus. And their big thing was what had happened with his art exhibit. So I did a package on them and I turned it in about a week before they had enough time to, tell me, hey, this is biased. Because for more information, both candidates that were running for president and vice president for student government were Black. And majority of the campaign on our side was Black. And so they called it biased and they said that they couldn't run it an hour before we were going on air due to the fact that they didn't have a perspective from the other side of the campaign. And so they pushed it to the next week. I was like, okay, persevere. Then I look on our little outline for tonight, the schedule, and it says that the same, woman that told me that I could not run my story has her own story up about that campaign. And that was really the first moment in this that really made me think, wow, we're not all the way there as I thought we were. It was very telling, but at the same time, it was more so motivation to keep going and push harder. And that moment right there really highlighted why I want to get into journalism and get into telling people's stories and keeping our truth alive. And it is such a great honor to sit here among all of you guys. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sharon.
Okay. All right. We have other hands raised. Ellie Francis is one of them.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Interesting. The young lady who just told that story, not unusual to hear that story down through the years, and I'm disappointed every time we hear it. But I'm glad that you're continuing to persevere. So do that because things are changing, and I think the one thing that I wanted to stress was that you guys coming up through this track right now have so many more opportunities than all of us here did even 10 or 20 years ago to tell that story. You mentioned television. I've had 45 years as a television news anchor and reporter across 5 different cities. And I've seen it change. When I came in, we were shooting film with film cameras and developing them in a huge room for broadcast that evening. And it was a tough turn. Linear editing was still in there.
pulling out the tape, putting back in the tape. So there's so many other things that you guys have to do now in the digital world that gives you the advantage of multiple platforms that are in many ways much bigger than some of the platforms that we've ever had. So continue to persevere. I've taught at two universities, Boston University and American University in Washington, D.C. And one thing I used to tell my students, it's something I got from one of my bosses and a mentor of sorts, John H. Johnson, who you recall was the publisher of Ebony and Jet magazine. I hosted their entertainment program for about 3 years, Ebony Jet Showcase. And Mr. Johnson was quite an individual, but at the time we were talking, this was in the late 90s, and we were trying to encourage him to move on, to expand the magazine to the digital world, this digital world that was growing up. We didn't have everything we have now, because of course it was the late 90s, but some of us could see it coming. He didn't necessarily see all that. And so one of the conversations he had with me when we had one of our conversations about expanding the magazine's world was the fact that things were changing. And so he wanted to emphasize to me, he says, Elliot, and he was a very simple man in many ways. He says, journalism is going to change in many ways going forward, and it should, but there are some things that will never change about it. And that's the way it should be as well. And he gave me the analogy. He says, take a knife. Look at knives have been around since the beginning of man, and they've changed in many different ways. The handles change, the materials that the knife is made out of, the tang, the guard, so you won't hurt yourself, and so on and so forth. But the one thing, and this is John Johnson now, looking me straight in the eyes, the one thing that won't change is the blade. The one thing that won't change is the blade. Because once you change the blade, it stops becoming a knife. It stops being a knife. Okay? And I would pass that on to my students in an effort to tell them, look, you're the vanguard of what's going to happen next. So don't be afraid to change anything as you go forward, because that's how this business will grow. That's how it will persevere. That's how it will triumph going forward. It won't ever be the same. But understand also, too, that there are certain basics that will never change. And as Gerald was telling you earlier, or telling all of us earlier, the basics are the things that will never change, that you hold on to, that you learn, and that you keep you keep sacred. Objective reporting, seeking the truth, shining light, and trying to elevate the truth in any way that you possibly can. And going by a set of ethics that conveys upon you the authority that causes people to trust you and trust that you know what you're talking about, that you've gone through the trouble of trying to verify those facts, those objective facts, so that people can have that at their fingertips and make their own decision about whether or not it's right or wrong or indifferent. So you keep those basics and then go ahead and change what you think you need to change. But you can't break the rules unless you know them. So learn those rules where you are now. Stay on it. It's a good time to be a journalist. It really is. And it's going to be a better time in short order, because we're going to make it that way.
All right. All right, Cam Glimpf. So your hand is up.
Hello, thank you everyone for this meeting. I am the editor-in-chief of the FSU and Florida Flambeau, which is Florida State University student-run independent newspaper. And over the course of our year, my year as editor-in-chief and just being at FSU in general, we've had to cover a host of issues at our school. Anywhere from my freshman year, there was a law passed that banned all funding for DEI activities in the state of Florida at higher education institutions. And so we've reported on the impacts of that everywhere from majors not being offered like African American studies to conference funding being canceled for students. And our campus has also signed a 287G agreement with ICE, which has allowed them to, or campus police officers to act as ICE officials. And our main goal with explaining this reporting and like, reporting it to our student body has been to sort of explain what's happening to students and empower them with that knowledge. But I think there's definitely a way to like bridge the explanations into actual action and empowering people to actually spark change in their community or in our campus community. And I really appreciate the diverse perspectives that were offered today and the words of wisdom. I look forward to bringing that back to my campus newspaper and hopefully sparking more action in my campus community. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. All right. I thought I saw another hand up. Um, but if not, I wonder.
Nichelle Smith is raising her
Oh,
hand.
really? Okay. All right, Nichelle, please.
Hi, I guess I lowered it by mistake. But hello, everyone. My name is Nichelle Smith. I'm a former investigative editor at USA Today, and now I am independent. Not as loud as Don Lemon, but still out there doing my own thing. I just wanted to share a bit of advice that I'd given to students in Canada when I did some lectures at high schools and colleges there. I remember talking with the students about some work that we had done in Angola, and that we would not have been able to really pull off this work. It was related to taking a descendant of the first Africans back to trace her history during 2019. And I remarked that we couldn't really have done that as a group if we had not brought ourselves into the equation in a much more personal way than I believe that Black journalists are encouraged to. It seems to me, as someone who graduated from Indiana University and also went to Purdue University, two predominantly white schools in Indiana, that I had all of the trappings, all of the advanced knowledge and wonderful teachers that made me an absolutely wonderful, hard-charging, go-getting white journalist, because I was told to be objective and to observe all of those fine standards that make a very, very straight blade. But what makes every blade, as Elliot Francis so eloquently said, what makes every blade individual is the handle and other things that are around that blade. So while the basics stay the same, it's what you bring individually to the equation that transforms you from a reporter, perhaps just another hack who cranks out the cop news every morning at 5 a.m., into an actual storyteller. And to get back to speaking to a Somali student in Ottawa, I spoke about how I did not feel that I'd become a true storyteller until I began to look at my life as a young woman growing up in Gary, Indiana, my career path through newspapers, ultimately getting to DC and BET and the Smithsonian, and now here at USA Today. Until I began to look at all that and pick apart, what I learned at each outset and try to apply that back, I wasn't really able to truly tell stories in a way that compelled other people. And when I said this, and the young Somali woman in Ottawa looked at me with shock, like, you mean we don't have to distill ourselves? I don't have to. And she had on her hijab and was Muslim and was one of those lucky people who could trace themselves all the way back to their very point on the continent where they had been born and raised and who they were from. And she said, I don't have to believe that. I don't have to distill. And it's almost like creating myself into another character in order to be a journalist, in order to tell news. And I said, no. Some people will tell you that in the name of objectivity, but I say no, because that's when you become a storyteller, when you can reach really deep into whatever emotion that you had and bring that out and make that count for whatever story you're writing. Um, that's all I wanted to really impress upon people. I think that gets missed, and that for a very long time, I know it myself, I thought that journalism was over here and myself was here. And it wasn't until I integrated everything that I really became, for myself, top of my game.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Nichelle.
Sure.
Is Jasper Smith still with us? Jasper with the Chronicle of Higher Education, former editor of the Hilltop at Howard University, the Mecca. Did I get it all in?
Amen.
Jasper, are you there? Oh, maybe she left. Okay. All right. I wonder whether let's see. Any of the other folks who has the broad view could speak up. We started out talking about the anti-DEI and the anti-immigration um, movements that are preventing people from doing what they went to college to do in the first place. And I wonder whether anyone has any more thoughts about that or information to share. Okay, Elijah has his hand up. Go ahead, Elijah.
Yeah,
What
and
is the
not
question?
The question is, do you have more information to share about some of these impediments that are unique to 2026, i.e., i.e., the anti-DEI push and the anti-immigration push, and how they might be affecting the life of student journalists?
um yeah, so and not since I already spoke, but just to jump in really quick, when we're
Yes.
talking about the development again of the black press and uh such newsrooms, my professor always tells me facts are imperative, but framing is a choice. And when we're looking at different newsrooms in 2026, we are seeing different choices as far as framing goes. And framing can include so many different things. It can include what voices you decide to go to for your article. It can go to what historical context you feel is necessary and what can afford to be omitted. It can include word choice. It can include your headline, what you decide to put in your headline. Because in this day and age with shortened attention spans, especially for younger readers, a headline, if it's not juicy enough, they're just not going to click on it. So depending on how you decide to phrase just the headline alone, or your opening graph, that will determine, how your readership does and how the information gets disseminated. And so I just think it's really important for us to understand our responsibility to really wrestle with how we frame. I think sometimes, especially I know at Morehouse culture, we're always moving, we're always on the go, always trying to meet deadlines. Everyone's doing everything. But I think sometimes it's important to slow down a little bit. In the field of journalism, I know that can be difficult, but sometimes we need to think about, well, how is my framing going to affect my reader? How is it going to be received? Is there a way that I can frame it differently, maybe to like open up the narrative, um, and bring in more schools of thought? And so that's just something that I've really been battling with recently, um, as a journalist. And I recently wrote an article analyzing or summarizing rather the State of the Union, President Trump's State of the Union address. Um, and I was working with Ernie Suggs, who is our kind of faculty advisor over our paper, and he and I were going back and forth over my word choice. I thought I was like, no, this word is necessary. He said, no, that word is it's biased. And so he was helping me kind of work through that process because there's a fine line to tread between, you know, framing in a way that shows the real truth and, a biased and a biased perspective that's kind of neglecting certain ideologies.
Got it. Okay. All right. I thought I saw another hand up.
Yeah.
Uh, Teresa Puente.
Yes, I just wanted to bring it back to the framing, especially I was invited here to talk a little bit about the Latinx perspective and what I'm doing with my students covering the Latino and immigrant community. One really important fact I ask even my students in my bilingual journalism class, the majority who are Latino, I ask them, what percentage of Latinos in the US are US citizens? And I won't give you the pop quiz now, but even my own students get it wrong. It's 80%. 80% of Latinos are US citizens. Another 10% or so are permanent residents. So undocumented people are less than 10%. This, I think, is an important fact for what the previous speaker was saying about framing. If we only frame immigration as an issue about legality, we're not doing our jobs as journalists. We and I appreciate what others have said about reporting on our communities, but that is such an important point because if you were to look at the national news, and surveys have shown that majority of Americans think that a majority of Latinos are undocumented, and that is simply not the case at all. And so I just invite you to reflect on that coverage. And when we report on our community, sure, we report some on immigration enforcement, but we try to normalize immigrants as people, profiles of immigrant professors, business owners, nonprofit leaders. And so I think this is like the thing that really enrages me every day is that I only see the community covered in terms of illegality, and that's just not the reality. So I'll stop there.
Hear that? Okay, thank you for that. Uh, Anyone else? Shirley Carswell, you have been pretty silent. What do you make of all this? She leads the Dow Jones News Fund.
Hi, thanks, Richard. No, I think it's all been a great conversation. I just wanted to say that in addition to the issues with coverage that that student newspapers are having, news organizations are having, there are also issues around opportunities. For instance, you know that in partnership with NYU's journalism school, the Dow Jones News Fund started 2 years ago this effort to try to increase the number of African American men studying journalism and going into journalism. So the first year we had great, a lot of great encouragement, and then the world changed. And then last year it was like a lot of news organizations were reluctant, afraid to support something that was called the Black Male Journalism Project. Mm-hmm. So it turned out that we had been planning to change the name anyway. So now it's the Ed Bradley Journalism Fellowship. And that seems to go over a little better for some people. But it is a thing where, this anti-DEI thing is affecting opportunity. It's affecting donations. It's affecting people who want to be affiliated with, organizations and programs that are specifically aimed at people of color. So it's not just the coverage, it's also scholarships, training, internships, and opportunities.
Can I just add to that? Are you listening? Can you hear me?
Yes.
It reminded me of the time when we had the funeral service for Ed Bradley.
Yes.
Who was, as you know, one of the great journalists of all time. And I was moderating the service. I was, whatever you call it, I was doing what you do when you call on everybody who needs to speak. And I had asked President Clinton to come, but he wasn't sure he would be able to make it, although he was in New York. And I was sitting with the family and in the front of the church, Riverside Church, and I looked up and I saw the president come in, look around. He was looking for me, I think, because when he found me, he came straight over to me and he said, I don't have a lot of time, but I do have something to say. And I said, well, I'm going to get you up there right now. And so I said, okay, now we have President Clinton who would like to make a speech, who would like to say a few words about Ed. And he said, look, I didn't do a lot of interviews when I first got to be president. He said, but there came a time I had followed Ed Bradley, and when he asked to interview me, I said yes immediately. And the reason was, and I'll never forget this phrase, he always sang in the key of reason. And I think that that's a beautiful thing to remember, because when we do our work as journalists, we have to sing in the key of reason. And whatever it is, that is a part of what I think makes us good, no matter what we're covering, when we sing or write or speak in the key of reason.
Here, here.
I'm writing that down. That's a great quote.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Let's see. Uh, Professor John Watson at AU. You teach the journalism and the law. Anything that strikes you about this conversation?
Well, I think that it's really important that students in journalism and everywhere learn about history, because the things being rolled back now, we're going to have to do the civil rights movement all over again. And we have to remember the sacrifices and steps forward taken by people like Charlayne Hunter-Gault. So history is going to show us the way forward. We had sisters and brothers who were strong enough to walk against the tide, and we need to let young people know it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible, and now it's more necessary than ever.
And I think we can't. One of the things I think is we can't apologize for being interested in and reporting on people of color. There's no reason to apologize for having interest in your own people and their whatever is going on with them, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. That is not something we should feel that we have to ask forgiveness for. I think that's important that we do it, because you know, if it's our funeral, we want whoever the president is, it won't be this one, but it'll be somebody who sings in the key of reason.
Indeed. All right, Angela Dodson.
Let me take. I just one. I want to say I'm a proud American University graduate. I got my master's there.
Oh, I forgot.
Two, I put in the chat room information about the scholarship that was started in my husband's name, and information about we are close to the deadline of when students have to apply for it is April 10th. And they need to be from Philadelphia or the Philadelphia area. And we will be giving it, I believe, May 1st or 2nd during a regional convention. For those of you who don't know, my husband, Michael Days, was one of those handful of top editors at a newspaper. 2 stints as editor of the Philadelphia Daily News and 1 stint as managing editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you.
All right. Now, Leon Carter, I see you there. Leon is a co-founder of the Sports Journalism Institute, which trains students to be good journalists. Anything from this conversation that you want to add to from that perspective?
You know, coming from the sports world, and also.
And you now are at the Athletic, I should say, too, editor at large.
Yes, I was just amazed when Ron Thomas mentioned what the students said about Wilt Chamberlain. But speaking of students, I want to applaud those who are on the call, taking it all in. I wish there were more, because they are really the future of our journalism newsrooms. And anything that we can say, I was impressed with the 2 women from in Dorothy Bland's window, and impressed with the young man from Morehouse, and others on the call. I encourage you to stay hungry. One of the things that I have seen over the years in dealing with students in the Sports Journalism Institute is that, when I came up, we had less, but we did more. We had less, but we were hungrier. Today, students have everything at many of the journalism schools, including some of the HBCUs. but they're not hungry enough. I talked to a student the other day and I said, I kind of wish some of you guys knew what eating a bologna sandwich was, or using Stephen A. Smith quote where he lived off of tuna fish and Kool-Aid when he was at Winston-Salem State. Students today don't know about those hardships. They have more. We need them to do more. So I appreciated hearing, from Charlayne Hunter-Gault and many of the other veterans on the call tonight. But what I would encourage students on the call is to stay hungry. We are living in some interesting times. If you're at a school like Florida A&M, there should be articles in your paper about a street that is going to be named after Charlie Kirk running through your campus.
Mm.
You need to explore that. I don't think we had Florida A&M on the call today. I think there's a bill in Florida that's going to require state-supported universities to have a street named after Charlie Kirk. Well, what do students at FAMU feel about that? So stay hungry would be my message. And more than ever, I do think, just as we were when we were coming up, we were excited about journalism. I still see that when I speak on college campuses, that whatever's going on in the world, it has not dampened the spirit of young journalists wanting to get into the profession, but it's incumbent, and I'll say this and I shut up, it's incumbent upon us to help them along the way. And as one person mentioned, we need to teach them history, because that's one thing that they're not teaching in history classes along the way. And those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we've got to wrap up here shortly, but I see David Dent from NYU is here, and of course NYU was just mentioned by Shirley Carswell about the Ed Bradley program. But I wonder if you have anything to add to what's been said here. Oh, you're unmuted. Unmute, please.
Oh, gotcha. I find it really, I guess one of the challenging and enlightening things for me over the past 4 years, I took over one of our graduate programs here at NYU, Reporting the Nation, Reporting New York. And I've made sure, even despite this climate that we're in terms of admissions, to make sure that diversity isn't a bad word in terms of admissions. And I've had much luck and much success with mentoring African American students and others who I am so proud of, because I know they're going to make a difference in the business. So they give me hope, and they also inspire me because they are hungry. They have pursued amazing stories. One of my students was in Lithuania during spring break, doing a story on how the doctors were going to the Ukraine to study trauma. I've had another student do an amazing piece in Maine on the Somalian community. Just this past year, looking at, exploring apprentice programs for the immigrant community to become lobstermen and women, which of course we know is a big industry in Maine. And I think that for me, the hope is that these young people, I heard someone speak about mentoring earlier, which is, I think, crucial for those of us who've been in the business and who are now in education, but still in the business, even as we teach. It's important for us to mentor. And it's important, of course, to mentor students of color, but to also enlighten others so that they bring they bring the kind of attitude into the world of journalism that we want the students of color that we mentor to bring. I really want to thank Richard for organizing this. This has just been an amazing, amazing and just so encouraging to me. Hearing all of the perspectives, from of course Charlayne Hunter-Gault and others that definitely inspire me.
Well, all right. Okay, we're out of time. Thank everybody for participating. We're going to have this available on YouTube uh, in the next 12 hours. And we're going to print out the chat room comments and to share with everybody for whom we have email addresses. And then we're going to for tonight, we're going to get on with the rest of our evening and think about what we're going to talk about next month. So if anybody has suggestions, please forward them. And thank you all for being here. And I think I've been getting a lot of favorable comments, and I hope that everybody, whether you're a professional or a student, take these comments to heart, think about them, and act on them. So thanks very much. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And hi, Charlayne.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.